The Pocahontas story most people know is a fairy tale, a myth crafted to comfort, not to tell the truth. The real person was not a princess, nor was her life a romance. Her name was Amenut, daughter of Wahunsenakau, leader of the Powhatan Confederacy. She was a child, perhaps only 10 or 11, when the English arrived in 1607. The famous story of her saving John Smith, almost certainly invented by Smith years later. The truth is far more tragic. Amenut was caught in the crossfire of invasion, not a willing bridge between cultures. She was kidnapped, held hostage, and forced to assimilate. Her life became a tool for colonial propaganda, used to sell the idea of a tamed new world. To understand her, we must strip away the legend and see the young Powhatan woman at the center of a violent upheaval. Her experiences were not unique, but emblematic of the trauma, disease, and destruction that followed European arrival. This is not the story you think you know. This is the story of Amenut. We'll explore her world, her kidnapping, her forced marriage, and her journey to England. We'll confront the reality of her death and what her true legacy means today. The myth is comforting, the truth is necessary. In Powhatan culture, names held power. Amenut had several. Her private name, Matawaka, meaning flower between two streams, and her childhood name, Amenut. These names were sacred, protected from outsiders to guard her spirit. The English only knew her by a nickname, Pocahontas, meaning playful one. This was a public name, a shield that kept her true identity hidden. The English latched onto Pocahontas, turning it into a brand and erasing the real person. Reclaiming her true names, Amenut, Matawaka, is the first step in reclaiming her story. Her identity was complex, layered, and fiercely protected by her people. The legend simplified her. The truth restores her depth. Names matter. They tell us who she really was. To honor Amenut, we must remember all her names. Amenut was born into the Powhatan Confederacy, a sophisticated alliance of 30 tribes in Tsenacomoco, now eastern Virginia. The Powhatan were settled farmers, hunters and fishers, living in fortified towns and governed by complex social structures. Her father, Wahunsenakau, ruled thousands through diplomacy and force. Society was matrilineal. Inheritance passed through the mother's line, binding the Confederacy together. The Powhatan cultivated corn, beans and squash, managed forests, and navigated rivers in dugout canoes. Their world was rich, ordered, and deeply connected to the land. When the English arrived, they intruded on a thriving civilization, not an empty wilderness. The English saw only resources. They missed the complexity and humanity of the people already there. Tsenacomoco was not primitive. It was a nation. This was the world Amenut was meant to inherit. The arrival of the English changed everything. The Powhatan world was about to be upended. As Wahunsenakau's daughter, Amenut's childhood was one of privilege and responsibility. She learned farming, weaving, medicine, and the skills that sustained her people. Her days were spent in the forests and rivers, absorbing the knowledge of her ancestors. Her future marriage would have been a political alliance, strengthening her father's rule. She was being prepared for leadership, not luxury. But in 1607, English ships shattered her world. Suddenly her homeland was filled with strangers and threats. The playful freedom of her childhood vanished, replaced by fear and uncertainty. The world she was raised to lead was under siege. By 1613, the fragile peace was gone. The English, desperate for leverage, targeted Amenut. Captain Samuel Argall learned she was visiting the Patawamek and conspired to kidnap her. Betrayed by those she trusted, Amenut was lured onto Argall's ship and taken prisoner. She became a bargaining chip, her life used to blackmail her father into submission. Wahunsenakau faced an impossible choice: surrender to English demands or risk his daughter's life. He sent a partial payment, but the English refused to release her. For over a year, Amenut was held captive, first in Jamestown, then Henricus. Her kidnapping marked a turning point. She was no longer a daughter, but a pawn in colonial war. The English saw her as a tool, not a person. Her captivity was a deliberate act of war, not a romantic adventure. The trauma of betrayal and imprisonment would haunt her life. Amenute's fate was now in foreign hands. Her world would never be the same. Amenute's captivity was a time of trauma and forced assimilation. The English assigned a minister to civilize her, erasing her Powhatan identity. Mattapony oral history says she was sexually assaulted, her first son born of violence, not love. Her conversion to Christianity and baptism as Rebecca were presented as triumphs, but they were acts of survival under duress. She was a prisoner, not a willing convert. The English celebrated her as proof of their superiority, ignoring the violence that broke her spirit. Her baptism was not a rebirth, but an erasure. Amenute's true self was buried beneath layers of colonial expectation. Her suffering was hidden behind a myth of salvation. In 1616, Amenute, now Lady Rebecca Rolfe, was paraded through England as a symbol of colonial success. The Virginia Company used her as living proof that native people could be civilized. In London, she was treated as an exotic curiosity, dressed in English finery and presented at court. The famous engraving shows a somber, weary woman, far from the cheerful legend. Her private name, Matoaka, was acknowledged, but her Christian identity was emphasized. The spectacle was carefully staged to sell a story of harmony and profit. Behind the scenes, Amenute was isolated, homesick, and ill. Her reunion with John Smith was tense and painful, a reminder of trauma, not romance. Her journey to England was not a triumph, but the final act of exploitation. She was a captive on display, far from home. In March 1617, as she prepared to return home, Amenute fell gravely ill and died at Gravesend, aged just 21 or 22. The official story is disease, but some oral traditions suggest she was poisoned, silenced before she could warn her people. Her death was suspicious, her grave unmarked, a symbol of her tragic displacement. Her husband quickly returned to Virginia, leaving their son behind. Whether by illness or foul play, her death was the result of forced removal from her homeland. For centuries, the world accepted a romantic myth that erased her trauma and agency. The real Amenute was silenced, her story replaced by a colonial fantasy. But her true name and story endure in oral tradition and the work of historians. Her life reveals the brutal reality of colonization and the resilience of indigenous peoples. Questioning the myth is essential to honoring her legacy. Amenute's story is not one of romance, but of survival and resistance. The truth is uncomfortable, but it matters. Remember her real name. Remember her real story.